rarely preached 2 times in the same place. Virtually every lesson that he taught was from a different pulpit. It was in a different setting, and it was often to a different group of people. Now, there may have been some from the last session that followed him, but many times he preached in different places to different people. He preached in the streets of Jerusalem and around those cities in Palestine. He preached on the shores of Galilee. He preached from a mountainside. He preached from the bow of Peter's boat. And of course, he preached on a hill. In fact, may I submit to you that the greatest preaching he ever did, the most powerful, in my estimation, preaching that Jesus ever did, came from the hill. And you might say, the hill, what do you mean by the hill? I'm going to explain that in just a minute. But over this week and next week, we are going to talk about the Sermon on the Hill. When I asked the membership here to give me some ideas on preaching, what do you want from the Bible? What do you want from God's Word? What do you need most? Someone asked me, I'd really like to talk about the 7 sayings of Jesus from the cross. Wow, that thrilled my soul. Because it's one of the greatest, most powerful sermons ever preached. I want to deal with 3 of those sayings this morning, and then 4 next week, if the good Lord is willing. By the time that the cross, by the time the events of Calvary took place, Jesus had very little left in him physically. He had been physically drained. You see, he went almost 24 hours without food or drink. He went almost 24 hours without any sleep. And so physically, just from that standpoint alone, he was drained. He began Thursday night, you remember, in the upper room in Jerusalem somewhere. He began to eat the Passover with his disciples. Matthew 26 really outlines that very detailed for us. And in verse 30, the Bible says, when they sung an hymn, they left that place and went into Mount Olivet. So it was at that time. What time was that? I'm not sure. But I believe it was late Thursday night. And they went down into the Kidron Valley, crossed over the Kidron Valley, went up onto Mount Olivet, in which was housed the Garden of Gethsemane. There was a mountain there. It was a mountain of olives. It was literally olive trees everywhere. In fact, they used to call it the olive press, because people would go in there and pick these olives. But in the middle of the olive garden, in this Mount Olivet, where there was a garden, a special garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, as you and I know. It was housed on this mountain somewhere, and Jesus went there Thursday night to go in and to pray and to be close to his Father. And of course, the events, you remember, happened in very detailed manner and very quickly through the night, into early morning Friday. And so he's nearing 24 hours. He's not quite there, but nearing 24 hours where he has not eaten, he has not drunk, he has not had any sleep at all. He's been up all night praying, frustrated because of the disciples. What? Couldn't you watch and pray with me even for a short time? And so his heart has to be very burdened at this point. He's about to take on the sin of the world. He's about to do the most horrific thing anyone could ever do, and that was die on a cross. You see, the Persians began crucifixion, but the Romans perfected it. And so it is the case that he was not crucified, that is, nailed to a cross by Jews. He was crucified by the Romans. Now, the Jews put him there, no question about that. Sin put him there. You and I put him there. But the Romans were the ones that really took part in the cruel acts. The cruel acts of lashing his back. You remember, a Jew would not lash more than 39 times, else they would go 40, forget one, and then they would be in trouble with the law. It wasn't the Jews that scourged my Lord. It was the Romans. They had no such law, no such custom. And so how many times was he beaten with the scourge? I don't know. But I know it was a great amount of time. Can you imagine his skin stretched over himself as he stood to that post? As they tied him to the post, and that cat o' nine tails or something like it, both pieces of bone and metal, stung to this leather whip with a handle of wood, and they would have whipped him. You could almost see it. The blood and the flesh would fly from him. Jesus was drained physically. He was drained emotionally by this time. He had gone through some of the greatest emotional strain a man could ever take. In fact, it is said that many people never made it past the scourging post. They died right there at the scourging post, either from shock or from trauma and loss of blood. But not Jesus. He was a man. And he stood at that scourging post like a man. And he took it like a man because he knew that was his lot. That's what he had to do. And then after that scourging post, they would have released him and began to lead him up a hill called Mount Calvary, or as our rendering that Jimmy read for us a minute ago, Golgotha, or the place of the skull. Literally has an outcropping that looks like a skull. No doubt because of all the people that had died there, it also was given the nickname the place of the skull. It was a place of crucifixion. It's a place where they took him outside the city to kill common criminals. Jesus began to walk that path after they had placed a cross upon his back, a wooden, rough, splintery cross. That cross could have weighed somewhere near 200 pounds. Now, men, you know what that's about, don't you? Maybe some of you ladies do too. I'll tell you what, we grab, and not like some of you farmers do, all right? I don't want to take credit for something that's not ours, but we grab 50-pound and 100-pound bags of feed at our house for our measly little animals from time to time. And I'll tell you what, it's enough to throw a 100-pound sack of feed on my back. I can't imagine what that must have been like to have been up all night, not eating or drinking, and being scourged and beaten and laughed at and mocked and ridiculed and spit in the face. And then asking me to put something like the cross on my back and carry it up that hill for sinners. But Jesus did it. Oh, you said, hold on a minute, preacher. He wasn't able to make that, remember? They had to compel Simon of Cyrene to help him bear his cross. No wonder. No wonder. He was emotionally drained. He was physically drained. I would submit to you he was even spiritually drained. You know, why me, Lord? Why me? God the Father, why me? Why am I doing this? I'm not saying he said that, but wouldn't that have gone through the back of your head? He had been denied by his closest friend, betrayed by the church treasurer, turned his back on him. Every one of those disciples fled. Not one of them stood with him. And yet he's going up that cross, up on Calvary's hill, for you and for me. The soldiers then laid him upon the cross he had just carried. They stretched out his arms. They drove a nail into one of his hands and the other of his hands. I don't know that it was through the palm of his hand or whether it was through the palm of his wrist. I know that many Roman crucifixions happened through the wrist because there was much more area to grip to so he wouldn't pull through. I do know that. I don't know where Jesus was nailed. That's where I'm assuming he was nailed. Something like maybe a railroad spike in diameter. You all know what a railroad spike is, right? Wisconsin's the land of dairy, but it's also the land of trains, right? I've seen more trains here than I've ever seen in my life. The size, most likely, of a railroad spike in diameter. Longer than a railroad spike, I'm sure. And so it is the case that a nail through this wrist, a nail through this wrist, and he was nailed to the cross. His feet were placed together, something like that, and then a nail driven through them. Can you imagine that pain alone of the nails, even if he was in good shape to that point? That would have put a man into shock. It would have put a man into just dying right there, but not Jesus. They dropped that cross in a hole. And there they crucified him, the Bible says. He died for the sins of the world. But in his last hour, his last dying breath, he preached 7 sermons that are of utmost importance to us this morning. You ask, well, what was he thinking? I wonder what he was thinking. I wonder what was going through his mind. I wonder if he had the church, you and I, in his mind. But he did, didn't he? He died to purchase the church with his own blood. Acts 20, verse 28. No question what he had on his mind, at least as far as that goes. I wonder if there was any bitterness in his heart. I know he was perfect. I know it wouldn't have been bitterness to the point of sin, but how would you have felt? Peter, seriously? I told you this was going to happen and you did it. I prayed for you. You did it, Peter. Why did you deny me? Why didn't you tell that little Jewish girl that you were one of mine? Why didn't you stand up for me? Judas, seriously? Not only did Judas betray him and do the unthinkable, but now he's dead. Jesus doesn't even have a chance to talk to him. His friend, this guy was his friend, his confidant, his buddy, he's dead. He's hanged himself. He's no longer alive. There are only 4 men in the Bible that have their last dying words recorded for us. Now, young people, if I were you and I had a young people's bulletin, I would open it to that 3rd page and I would listen to what the preacher has to say, because I think this might be in your young people's bulletin. 4 men had their dying words recorded for them. Jacob, the father of the Israelites. Moses, the lawgiver to Israel. Stephen, the faithful Christian martyr. And of course, Jesus, the Savior of the world. Last words are powerful, aren't they? Last words always are remembered. If you've ever had a loved one die that was close to you, you remember what they said to you last. You remember their words to you and the look in their eyes. That's where Jesus was right now. He's looking at a group of people that he loved even though they didn't love him. And he's begging and pleading to his Father certain things on their behalf. 3 sayings from the cross is what I want to deal with this morning. What did that sermon entail? What was preached on the Sermon on the Hill? May I submit to you, number 1. There was a word of compassion. Look at Luke 23 and verse 34. If you have your Bibles, Luke 23 and verse 34. Then said Jesus, here it is, this sermon that was short, sweet, right to the point, but as powerful as any sermon ever preached. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Is it not somewhat surprising? In the midst of this terrible agony and pain, one would pray? Well, you say no. When someone's in great pain and great distress, of course they're going to pray. That part doesn't impress me about Jesus so much as what he prayed. When you are going through a struggle, when you are going through a trying time, what is it very natural for you to do as a person? To pray for whom? You. I don't believe that's sinful. I don't believe that's wrong. When I'm going through a struggle, when I'm in my valley, I can almost guarantee you it's very easy for me to remember Rodney into my prayer, right? God, get me through this valley. Help me with this struggle I'm facing. Help me with that. Me. It's easy to pray for me. Because, see, I'm the one in there. I'm the one in that problem, in that struggle. But you notice Jesus didn't pray for himself. Now, in John 17, in preparation for this, he prayed for himself. He prayed for the disciples. He prayed for all mankind, but not here. He prayed a word of compassion for sinners that were about to put him to death. He's very close to it. A word of compassion. That's remarkable to me that in the last hours of his life, he prayed for someone else, not himself. You know, it's reminding me of Isaiah 53 and verse 12. Therefore will I divide a portion with the sinners, and I will make intercession for the people, Isaiah said. Speaking of Calvary, speaking of Jesus. 700 years before this event that we're reading in Luke 23, the prophet said that he is going to make intercession for the people. Did he make intercession? That's exactly what he was doing. Father, forgive them. I am here in between your wrath and their sin, and I'm asking you to forgive them, for they don't understand what they're doing. And when I think about that, I think about Jesus practiced what he preached. Do you remember Matthew 5 and verse 44 in that great Sermon on the Mount? Not on the hill, but on the mount. He prayed, and in Matthew 6, he taught him how to pray. Matthew 5, he taught him how to live. In Matthew 5 and verse 44, I said, now you've heard it said that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, you love your enemies and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the sons of your Father. You know, it's one thing to preach a great sermon. It's another thing to live a great sermon. Jesus did both. That's why he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. For what proceeded out of his mouth was seen in his life. Right here, enemies of him. How difficult, people, would that be? To pray for somebody that has just drove a nail through your hands. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I have trouble praying for people that have said mean things to me. Do you have trouble sometimes with that? In fact, I still struggle with it today. I remember a lady several years ago that said something so unkind to me. And there are days when I think about that as I'm driving down the road. And I'll be honest with you, the first thing that comes to my mind is not a prayer. I'm not praying that she'll change her heart and be saved. Well, preacher, shouldn't you? I could put a facade on and tell you that's what I'm praying, but it'd be a lie. That's not what I'm praying. I'm often sometimes thinking about, you know what? I'd like the opportunity to see her again. I'd like the opportunity to tell her exactly what I think now. Oh, but not Jesus. Not the Master. He hung on Calvary's tree, and his words were, Father, forgive them. I say unto you, love your enemies, and pray for them which despitefully use you. Jesus, thank you so much for preaching and teaching us how to live. But thank you for showing us how to live. You really believed what you preached, Jesus. Amen. That's exactly what he did. The story is told of a hardened German prisoner whose diary was found later after he had been released from prison. It tells of the effects of this prayer upon his life. The story goes, and I quote, "My heart was hardened as I sat in a cold, dark prison, grossly mistreated by other inmates and even by the wardens. Each day, I became more resentful and hateful. But one day, I happened upon a New Testament, and I began to read about this man named Jesus." He continues, "I concluded at that point, erroneously concluded, but he concluded that Jesus was an exceptional man, but certainly was not divine." That's what he said. Okay? At this point, that's what he came up with. Jesus was a great man, but he's not divine. I don't believe that, and neither do you, but that's what he said at this point. But let's read the diary a little further. "But as I continued to read through the New Testament, I came upon this prayer by Jesus on the cross. And it so pierced and softened my hard heart. I clearly saw that no man could utter such a prayer, and a man who did it was not really a man at all. This changed prisoner concluded, I passed through all sorts of experiences, and have often been urged to repent of my sins. In spite of all this, however, I did not repent. And then, by the power of this one phrase of Christ's, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, my unspeakably hardened heart was changed. Such power is not in man alone, but in God above." He got it right, didn't he? That's right. That pierced his heart. How Jesus could say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It changed this man's life. And I submit to you, that's what sermons do. But perfect sermons change our lives even better. And this was a perfect sermon. This was one that was preached from a man who knew all about forgiveness. You see, when I preach on forgiveness, I just deal with little things like you do. People might look at me wrong or say an unkind thing to me or my children or my wife. I don't really deal with people driving nails in my hands. And I don't deal with people, backstabbing me to the point that Peter was backstabbing Jesus. I can't really deal with forgiveness from that angle, but Jesus can. He understands what it means to forgive. Now the question is asked, Father, forgive them. Was Jesus' prayer answered? If it was, when? And if it wasn't, why wasn't it? I submit to you it was answered. In Acts chapter 2, verse 37 beginning, prior to 37, Peter's preaching a sermon to people who crucified the Lord. These same people, some of these same people that were standing at the cross were gathered on the first Pentecost following his resurrection in the city of Jerusalem in Acts 2. And as they stood there, Peter began to preach a sermon about Jesus and about how they had taken with wicked hands and crucified and slain the just. Then in verse 37, the Bible says, then when they heard this, they were pricked in the heart. That means they were cut to the quick. They were cut in the conscience. It hit them like a brick in the face. Wow. It was us who crucified him. They were pricked in the heart, and they said to Peter and the rest of the apostles, Men and brethren, what shall we do to be saved? Well, God, are you going to answer his prayer? Absolutely. Then Peter said unto them, Repent and be baptized, every one of you, for or in order to obtain the forgiveness of sins. Ye shall receive the gift of God's indwelling Spirit. For this promise, verse 39, now watch it, I like this part. For this promise, what promise? Repent, be baptized equals salvation in spirit. For this promise is unto you and your children. So it's unto you, Jews. Not you Jews, but them Jews. It's unto you, Jews, and to your children. For this promise is unto you and to your children, and as many of them that are far off. Now you say, who is far off? That's an idiom in the Bible for Gentile. You go to Ephesians 2, you'll see the idiom used again. Paul was talking to them who weren't nigh to Christ, but they were far off. Far off in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, literally is an idiom to refer to us, Gentiles, people that are not Jews, people who did not have the law of God. For this promise is unto you and your children, and all them that are far off, even as many as the Lord our God shall call. With many other signs they testify and exhort, saying, Save yourselves from this untoward generation. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and there were added unto them about 3,000 souls. Right? Amen. That's how God answered the prayer. Guess what? God the Father is still answering the prayer today. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. How can we be forgiven today? The same way those Jews in Acts 2 were forgiven. The same way the Samaritans were forgiven. The same way the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8 was forgiven. In Acts 9, Saul of Tarsus was forgiven the same way. Acts 10, Cornelius, Acts 10:11, he was saved the same way. Acts 10:48, he commanded them to be baptized. Baptism is part of how God saves people. It's God's plan. It's his operation. Colossians 2 and verse 12. Oh, I've got one brewing on that one. Colossians 2 and 1:12, it's the operation of God. Think about that for a little bit. What happens in an operation? That's all I'm telling you. That is all I'm telling you, because it's coming soon. All right? Probably October, November, December, by the way, I'm looking at in my schedule now. He answered the prayer. And he'll answer it this morning. God, I need to seek forgiveness. How am I going to do it? Oh, you're going to do exactly what God tells you to. Now, I'll detail that in a little bit at the end of my sermon. There was a word Jesus spoke, and it was a word that we all need to hear. It's a word of compassion. May I submit to you number 2? You have your list, and if you're looking at those points, number 2 is a word of consolation. Turn to Luke 23, and let's look at 42 through 43. Luke 23, verses 42 to 43. Now this is an interesting one. In fact, parents, I have in your young people's bulletin a section on the weekly Devo helps for you here that I really think would be good, just in my opinion, and I could be wrong in my opinion, but I think it might be good for you parents, we parents, us parents, to discuss with our children, and I look forward to doing that, hopefully tonight, to discuss with our children about the thief on the cross. Here's where it talks about that. We're going to explain this to our children. I want to talk about the thief on the cross. But look at Luke 23, verse 42 beginning. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Who was speaking here? It was one of those malefactors. It was not the one that railed on him, but the other one who was the good one, you might say. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Think about this. Christ's first words from the cross were his prayer for sinners. His second phrase from the cross was an answer to a sinner's plea. Jesus is all about sinners, isn't he? He's all about loving them and forgiving them and asking them to come into his abode, asking him to come into his kingdom. That's what he's about. Isn't that what he told that short man in Luke 19 and verse 10? That wee little fellow that climbed up in a sycamore tree to see him, Zacchaeus by name. Do you remember what he said to Zacchaeus in Luke 19 and verse 10? For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. We've got to remember that, brethren. Sometimes we get it in our minds that sinners have a plague and we can't touch them because they're so sinful. Well, let me tell you, Jesus is in the sinner business. Now, I would submit to you that He's in the sinner business in the proper way. I'm not asking us to embrace sinners in their sin, but I'm asking us and pleading with us through the mouth of Jesus to say, listen, leave your sin and come into the fold of Jesus, right? That's what we're about. We're about the lost. For the Son of Man came not to serve, but to be a servant, to save those. Matthew 20, verse 28. You remember the golden text of the Bible? John 3:16, as man has called it. They've termed it the golden text, and I know why. John 3:16, 17. Listen to it now. For God so loved the world that He gave. For God so, that adverb of the Greek, so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But don't stop with 16. Keep on going to the next verse. For God sent not His Son into the world to condemn the world. But listen now. Why did He come? But that the world through Him might be saved. Jesus came to save sinners, of whom I am chief, the Apostle Paul once said. I like what was written in a book I read recently. It said this: somewhere there is a gravestone carved with this simple epitaph: I do not seek a kindness equal to that given Paul, nor yet the grace granted Peter, but the forgiveness thou didst grant to the robber, that I earnestly crave. Yeah, today you'll be with me in paradise. That's the forgiveness I want. Can I be saved today? Yes, I can. Can I be saved like the thief on the cross? Yes, I can. And you're like, oh, how? Well, if you think about it, the thief did exactly what Jesus asked him to do, right? Did he believe in Him as the Son of God? Absolutely he did. Well, you say, hold on a minute, preacher. What about repentance? I'd say that thief was penitent as penitent could be. He changed his ways upon that cross. You say, we got you now, because what about baptism? Well, let me tell you a couple of things about that subject. Number one, I don't know if he was baptized or not. But I wouldn't even spend more than a second on that, because it really doesn't matter. He said, well, hold on, whoa. You just said that baptism is part of God's plan. Well, it is. Now, part of God's plan. When the thief died, it wasn't part of God's plan. The thief died under the old law. Now you might say, wow, this preacher is off his rocker. And in some things, you may be correct. But I promise you that if you'll take the time to study it, and if you don't believe that right now, that's wonderful. That's not a problem. But at least sit down and study it and whet your appetite enough. Wait a second. What are you talking about? The old law and the new law. Baptism for the forgiveness of sins, but the thief wasn't baptized. What about that? You know what excites me about that more than anything? Is the Bible's clear on that. We can just open up the Scripture and we can find out exactly that story about the thief on the cross. Now, what my hope is, I preach basically for two reasons. Three, really. Well, I guess three. Number one, to please Almighty God. That's my first one. I preach number two, to edify and encourage you good people here in Spencer. And I guess across the world. I'm on YouTube. Did you know that? You have a famous preacher. I'm on YouTube. Yeah. I have a face made for radio, and I told them that. They still put me on YouTube. And then thirdly, I preach so that a visitor may hear the Word of God and say, I never heard that before. And that they'll take the time to ask why. And if they give me the opportunity, I'll sit down with them kindly. You say, well, you know, big discussions, they always turn into arguments with religious people. They don't turn into arguments with me. If it turns into an argument, we've both lost. I don't have time to argue. I do that at home. I don't have time to do that with you. But now if we sit down together and we open God's book, we'll find the truth. Well, you say, what are you saying, preacher? I'm saying you can teach me some things too. There's not one person I've studied with that I haven't learned something. You know why? Because I'm a student of a book. And I keep learning as I go. You would do me a favor if you would study the Bible with me. Study about that thief on the cross. Ask me about that. I would love to share that with you. It was a word of consolation. Today you'll be with me in paradise. The third and final point of that sermon that he preached was a word of commitment. Was a word of commitment. Look at John 19. Flip over to the Gospel according to John, chapter 19 and verse 26. 26 and 27. John 19, verse 26 and 27. Well, bear with me as I try to get through this one, okay? This is a tough one for me. It's a word of commitment. John 19, verse 26 beginning. When Jesus therefore saw his mother And the disciple standing by, whom he loved, he said unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then said he to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour the disciple took her unto his own home. As Jesus was struggling, barely being able to take a simple breath. You got to understand crucifixion at this point. You got to understand what's going on. You see, we look at those nails, and we look at the nails in his feet, nails in his hands, and we look at that painful cross, and we think, they must have died of shock or trauma or blood loss. That might have been the case sometimes, but very few times did they ever last that long. They usually died, according to those who were experts, like the Romans, in crucifixion, they usually died of suffocation. Because you see, their bodies would hang, and their bodies would hang like this to where they could not breathe. Now, it wasn't really that hard, they say, to inhale a breath. But to exhale a breath was excruciatingly painful. So these sayings alone show me the power of Jesus. He was hanging there, barely able to take a breath, and yet he's still saying stuff. He's still preaching his message. There he is, hanging down, no doubt suffocating, gagging, pushing himself up to get a breath. And he takes the care to look down and see his mother, and in her eyes, what did Mary see? Have you ever thought about putting yourself in Mary's shoes at this point? I can't imagine that, mothers. Can you? I can't imagine watching my son, my firstborn son. It was Mary's firstborn, right? She was a virgin when she had Jesus. And there he was, her firstborn. Now, mothers, bear with me through this. I want to take us to the cross. So just bear with me as we think about this. What do you suppose Mary's eyes and her cheeks were filled with? Would I be off base in saying she was filled with tears and heartache? What do you think she might have been thinking? Do you think her mind could have gone back to that day when her soul magnified the Lord and she spoke what we call the Magnificat from Luke 1:46 and following? Do you think her soul went back to that day when she praised God for a baby in her womb? Did she reflect upon that cold night at the inn when her Joseph first held their newborn son? Did she remember the day maybe Jesus took his first steps? We sometimes look at Jesus in a totally different light, but remember, the Bible paints him as a human, right? 100% divine, no doubt about that. He was deity, God in the flesh, Isaiah 9:6. But he was a son. He was someone's son. Mary's little boy. Mothers, do you remember your son's first steps? Oh, we do, don't we, Jolene? We remember those days. I remember Joshua going down the steps in Moundsville. He would not go down the steps. Would not go down the steps. One day I came home from school, and I said, son, why don't you just do it like this? And he did it perfectly. And he's doing it ever since. Only now he goes down the right way forward. I remember those steps. I remember the day he first said, Dad, Dad, and Mama. I remember the first real food he took. Mothers, you remember that. You remember your children. Mary remembered those things as her son was on the cross, and now her eyes meet his eyes. What must have he been thinking? Oh, the care of my mother. What's going to happen to my mom? Mom, are you going to be okay, John? Please take her. Take her with. That's your mother now, John. John and he had a very close relationship, and so he commits the care of his mother to John. Do you think that Mary might have recounted the words of Simeon in Luke 2 and verse 35? Yea, a sword shall pierce through your own soul also, Mary. I guarantee you, mothers, there was a sword placed within Mary's soul on this day. This wasn't a sermon where she could have said, that's my boy preaching, like she might have said on the Sermon on the Mount. She might have gleed with joy whenever she saw the power of Jesus as he told the people in the temple to repent and to change their ways. She might have said, that's my boy, he's got courage. But not on this day. There was a sword pierced through her soul. Whatever her thoughts were, we know that she was engulfed in dismay and pain for her firstborn as he died a criminal's death. Her soul was pierced, and what must have been done to the soul of my Lord. And yet, even with a pierced soul, he still thought about others. At this point, his mother. I submit to you folks, last words are powerful words. Perhaps you've watched a loved one die and heard his or her last words. What are they? They're usually words of love, words of farewell, too often words of regret and remorse. All those describe the words of a parting person from this life. Jesus' words are the most powerful words ever spoken. And they reveal who he was, what his character was. Others, in all three of the seven sayings, what were they? They were all sermons to other people. One was to sinners, one was for a sinner, and the third one was for his mother. Jesus cared. In these words, these messages, these sermons, we find the true meaning of Calvary. It's about love and forgiveness. When we stand around it, someone said, we better listen carefully. We better listen to the Sermon on the Hill. And while the cross is a symbol of death, it is also a symbol of life for everyone who falls before it in obedient faith. I'm mixed emotions this morning. I have mixed emotions when I look at Calvary. It breaks my heart when I read these sayings. When I understand what Jesus did for me, it breaks my heart. But you know, there's another side of me that's very thankful. There's another side of me that's very happy that he died, because without his death, I could have nothing. I would be nothing, and I am nothing without it. You said, preacher, what about this plan that God gave to be saved? The plan was spoken. The plan was revealed. And it's a plan you and I can obey today. What must I do to be saved? How can I be saved because of Jesus on the cross? You need to believe that he is the Son of God. I'll tell you, folks, those three sayings show me that he's better than a man. He's deity. He's God in the flesh. You need to believe that he is God's Son. John 8:24, Jesus said, if you believe not that I am, you'll die in your sins. We need to repent of our sins. I'll tell you, when I stand at Calvary, it makes me want to leave sin. It makes me want to embrace God's way. That's what repentance is. Repentance isn't perfection. Repentance is simply saying no to my lust and yes to God. Luke 13:3 and 5. Would you confess him before men? Romans 10:9 and 10 tells us that we must confess. And then you must be baptized. Behind me is a pool where we fill it up with water. And we fill that thing up to where we can immerse you in the water for the forgiveness of your sins. I like to tell the young people that when you come up out of the watery grave, if you look back real quick while the drain's going down, you'll see the horns falling off. You'll see the sins going right down that drain. That's what the cross is all about. That's what his blood, where we meet it in that watery grave, is all about. If you're here this morning, you've not submitted to God's will, I'll tell you, the Sermon on the Hill ought to convince you. It ought to convince you to follow Jesus. If you're here this morning, you're a child of God, but you've left the cross. You've not been bowing at the cross. You've not been understanding what Jesus did for you, and you need to repent. You need to pray for God's forgiveness. I'd encourage you to listen to Jesus as he preaches from the hill and respond to him this morning while we stand.